Long before men named their gods or drew the boundaries of kingdoms, there were stories that slithered through the minds of every civilization like a whisper in the dark. They called them dragons. Some said they were born from the breath of mountains. Others believed they came from the chaos before creation itself. No one has ever seen one, and yet, somehow, everyone remembers them. From the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the burning deserts of Mesopotamia, from China's river valleys to the misty coasts of Wales, dragons have always existed in art, in fear, in prayer. Sit back, relax, and let the ancient world unfold. Picture the first humans gazing at a thunderstorm, the sky cracking open in fury. Lightning ripped across the heavens like the lash of a celestial serpent. To them, the world was alive with unseen creatures, immense, scaled, and powerful. When volcanoes erupted, they said dragons were stirring beneath the crust. When the sea foamed and raged, they imagined wings beating under the surface. Across millennia, the image stayed sometimes as protector, sometimes as destroyer, but always as something beyond human control. The word dragon itself carries the weight of that awe. From the Greek darkeion, meaning great serpent, its roots go even deeper to the ancient Proto-European dirk, meaning to see or to watch. The dragon was never just a beast. It was the watcher of the world, the symbol of eyes that never closed. Some cultures saw it as divine wisdom, others as the perfect enemy. And yet, across continents that had never touched, people described the same creature: long body, terrible jaws, scales hard as metal, wings like thunderclouds. Was it coincidence or memory? Did ancient people share something deeper than trade or Warren inherited vision of something once real? Some researchers suggest the tales might have come from encounters with dinosaur fossils, misinterpreted as evidence of living monsters. Others whisper about ancient catastrophes, comets, floods, or creatures that humanity wiped out but never forgot. Every theory leads to another shadow. The dragon doesn't belong to one land or one story. It belongs to the human mind itself, the part that wonders what watches from the dark. And so, we begin our descent into the firelit tunnels of myth, where belief and memory intertwine. Because to understand dragons is to understand what humanity fears and what it secretly longs to become. In the oldest civilizations, dragons weren't monsters to be slain. They were the architects of the world itself. In the myths of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the dragon was the chaos from which everything else emerged. The Babylonians spoke of Tiamat, a vast serpent of the sea whose body was the storm, whose blood became the rivers, and whose bones were the mountains. When the god Marduk defeated her, he split her carcass into half to form the heavens, half to form the earth. The first map of the cosmos, drawn from the body of a dragon. In Egypt, the story twisted through desert sands. There, the serpent Apep crawled through the underworld, trying each night to devour the sun god Ra. The battle between light and darkness, life and death, was written in scales and fangs. To the Egyptians, chaos was never destroyed, was simply held at bay, coiled in the blackness beyond dawn. Across the Indus Valley and into the Vedic hymns of ancient India, we meet another echo of the same shape, the serpent Vritra, who blocked the world's waters until the storm god Indra split him open, releasing the monsoon rains. The message was the same from Mesopotamia to the Ganges. Creation was born from struggle, and the dragon was the first barrier between order and the void. Sit back and imagine it: the roar of thunder, the hiss of rain, the pulse of fear that ancient people must have felt as they watched lightning dance across a black sky. They didn't see weather. They saw gods wrestling serpents. Some scholars believe these stories reflect humanity's earliest attempts to explain natural cycles day and night, flood and drought, chaos and calm. Others think something more primal was at work, that perhaps the image of the dragon was encoded deep in our survival instincts. The ancient fear of snakes magnified into cosmic proportions. Whatever the truth, every early culture gave the serpent a place in the story of beginnings. It was never fully evil, never entirely good, which was the necessary chaos that life needed to define itself against. The dragon was both the end and the beginning, the devourer and the mother, and as these ancient voices whispered their myths into clay, papyrus, and stone, one truth rippled through time. Creation itself came from the scales of something enormous, something watching, something older than gods, far from Mesopotamia's dry plains. Across mountains and monsoon winds, another civilization gave the dragon an entirely different face. In ancient China, dragons were not creatures of destruction, they were the pulse of heaven itself, the breath that made the seasons turn and the rivers flow. Where Western stories painted dragons as beasts to be slain, the Chinese called them long symbols of wisdom, power, and divine harmony. Sit back and picture the imperial courts, incense rising like clouds, banners rippling with golden serpents that seemed to move as the wind passed through silk. The emperor was said to be a descendant of dragons, his rule legitimized by the mandate of heaven, a spiritual bond between sky and earth. To see a dragon in the clouds was to witness the approval of the cosmos. But the Chinese dragon was not one creature, was a fusion of many, the head of a camel, horns of a deer, eyes of a demon, scales of a carp, claws of an eagle. It could soar through the air without wings, swim through water without fins, and summon rain from an empty sky. Ancient farmers prayed to these beings for rain, burning offerings by riverbanks, hoping the celestial serpents would twist through the clouds and bless the fields. Yet beneath the reverence, there was also awe on understanding that dragons were unpredictable. They could bless or destroy, depending on the balance of heaven's will. In Taoist belief, the dragon represented yang, the creative, active energy of the universe. Its counterpart, the tiger, was yin, the passive force. Together they formed the eternal dance of harmony and conflict. In Chinese temples, coiling dragons guarded gateways, curling around pillars, as if watching every soul that entered. Scholars believe the myth may have roots in ancient totem worship, where tribes identified with serpentine river spirits. Others suggest it emerged from the reverence of crocodiles and large snakes that once ruled the rivers of southern China. But whatever their origin, the image grew into a universal symbol of divine energy. The dragon wasn't feared, it was celebrated, danced for, painted, and sung to. It was life itself, in motion, and as the belief spread eastward to Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, the dragon's legend would evolve again, shedding scales, crossing borders, and whispering a new story of balance, destiny, and the power of the unseen sky as the world moved into the shadowed corridors of the Middle Ages. The dragon took on a darker skin. What had once been a celestial guardian in the East became, in the West, a symbol of sin, chaos, and the eternal struggle between man and temptation. In crumbling monasteries, lit only by flickering candlelight, monks painted dragons in the margins of holy texts not as gods, but as reminders of the devil's deceit. The book of Revelation had spoken of a great red dragon cast down from heaven, and that verse alone reshaped centuries of imagination. To the medieval mind, dragons were no longer creatures of nature. They were fallen angels, the very breath of hell. The legend of St. George and the dragon became the anthem of this belief. Imagine it, a lonely princess chained by a lake. A monstrous beast rising from the depths, smoke pouring from its nostrils, wings cutting the mist like blades. St. George appears, his armor gleaming beneath the sun, his lance ready. When he slays the dragon, it isn't just a victory over the beast, it's the triumph of faith over evil, purity over corruption. Yet beneath the surface of that story lies something deeper, something older. The dragon, in this tale, is not merely an enemy. It is a test, a mirror reflecting the fear of the unknown world, the chaos that humanity sought to conquer. Across Europe, from the Welsh hills to the forests of Germany, dragons became guardians of treasure, symbols of greed and gluttony, their hoarded gold shining like the forbidden fruit of Eden in stone and scripture. They coiled around church pillars, sneering at those who dared to enter, and yet there was beauty in their terror. In cathedrals, gargoyles shaped like dragons watched over the faithful, their grotesque forms both warning and protection. In heraldry, they stood on shields, their wings outstretched, embodying the strength of kings. By the 12th century, dragons were everywhere in tapestries, legends, and dreams. They had become the embodiment of the medieval soul, torn between heaven and hell, courage and fear, faith and fire. But the deeper question remained, were these beasts merely stories, or echoes of something mankind once saw, something that once crawled beneath the same sun? High in the misty mountains of ancient Wales, another story took shape, one that blurred the line between myth and prophecy. The tale begins with Vortigern, a warlord desperate to build a fortress on Snowdon's slopes, a place of refuge against the advancing Saxons. But every time his men laid stones for the foundation, the earth swallowed them whole. Frustrated and terrified, Vortigern sought answers, and the child prophet Merlin was brought before him. Merlin listened, his eyes deep and knowing, and then he spoke of what lay beneath the Solar Pool, and within it, 2 sleeping dragons, one red and one white. When the pool was drained, the air filled with a roar that shook the mountains, and the 2 creatures rose, locked in battle. Their scales clashed like thunder, their breath ignited the air, and their tails tore through the earth like rivers of flame. Merlin's voice cut through the chaos. The white dragon would triumph, symbolizing England's conquest of Wales, but the red dragon would one day return and reclaim the land. The legend carried through centuries, whispered by poets and bards, painted on banners and shields. The red dragon became the emblem of the Welsh spirit unyielding, proud, eternal. It wasn't just a beast anymore. It was a nation's heart, its struggle made flesh and scale. Some historians believe the story was born from real tribal wars between the Britons and Saxons, reimagined through myth to explain loss and hope. Others think it was an allegory of cosmic balance, the eternal struggle between opposing forces, light and dark, order and chaos. But whatever the truth, the tale endured, weaving itself into the very fabric of Celtic identity. In Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, the story became immortal, a prophecy of conquest and rebirth. Even centuries later, as knights rode beneath crimson banners, they carried the dragon not as a symbol of fear, but of destiny. The dragon had transformed again from enemy to emblem, from destroyer to protector. And as the fire of belief spread across Europe, every region would shape its own version, its own dragon of stone, smoke, and spirit. But deep beneath the symbolism, one question lingers. Were these stories born from imagination, or from something ancient that once stirred beneath the earth, waiting for mankind to remember? As Europe's cathedrals rose toward heaven, the dragons sank into stone. They became gargoyles, grotesque faces twisted in eternal screams, perched on ledges above church doors, watching the faithful below. To the priests, they were symbols of sin cast out, reminders of damnation that lingered beyond the sacred walls. To the people, they were guardians protectors who spat rainwater instead of fire, their mouths open in silent warning. But where did these creatures come from? Some say they were inspired by an older legend from France of a dragon called La Gargouille that haunted the river Seine near Rouen. It was said to rise from the waters, its wings vast, its breath so foul that it blackened the sky. Every year, the people offered it a human sacrifice to calm its hunger. Then came Romanus, a priest armed with faith alone. He promised to free the town if they would build a church in God's name. When he faced the dragon, the cross in his hand glowed like fire, and with it he subdued the beast. Its severed head was mounted on the walls of Rouen, the first gargoyle. They said its mouth still opened to release the storm. Over time, masons carved thousands more, twisting dragons into the very bones of Europe's sacred architecture. Look closely at their eyes, some terrified, some mocking, some almost human eyes, if aware they once had breath and power. They were the trapped spirits of an older faith, woven into the new one. Pagan serpents turned to Christian sentinels. Yet the people never truly forgot their other side. Beneath the steeples and sermons, villagers whispered of dragons that still slept under rivers, curled around treasures, or guarded the bones of saints. The church might have changed their form, but the dragon's essence survived, a bridge between fear and reverence, between the world of man and the world of myth. The gargoyle became a silent storyteller, its stony grin hiding the truth that humanity had not slain its dragons, only imprisoned them. And as centuries passed, their faces weathered by rain and time, one could almost imagine them waiting for the moment when faith would falter, when stone would crack, and when the old gods, scaled, winged, and wise, would rise once more into the storm. As the age of chivalry dawned, dragons found new life on banners, shields, and royal crests. The battlefield became their new kingdom, their wings spreading not in fire but in the shimmering folds of silk and gold. Knights bore them into war as symbols of strength, courage, and unyielding will. To have a dragon upon your shield was to wear fear itself as armor. But even here, in the world of heraldry, their meaning split. In some crests, the dragons stood for Satan's defeat, crushed beneath the sword of virtue. In others, it was power unchained, the raw spirit of a house that would not bow. Uther Pendragon, the mythical father of King Arthur, was said to bear 2 golden dragons crowned with red royal, radiant, divine. His very name, Pendragon, meant head of the dragon, marking him as one chosen by fate. As heraldry evolved, so too did the dragon's form. Artists began to distinguish between dragons with 4 legs and those with 2. The 4-legged creature retained the name dragon, majestic and wise, while its 2-legged cousin became known as the wyvern, leaner, faster, and more vicious. To see a wyvern on a banner was to know its bearer was a slayer of serpents, a conqueror of plague and envy. Yet another cousin emerged from the imagination of scholars and priests, the cockatrice, born from a serpent's egg laid by a rooster and hatched in filth. Its gaze, they said, could kill a man on sight, its breath poison the air. And beyond that, horror slithered the basilisk, even more feared, a creature born of blasphemy and nightmare. These were not dragons of glory, they were the sins of man given scales. In the hands of poets and kings, dragons became language, symbols that spoke of ambition, pride, and destiny, to where one was to declare one's place between heaven and hell, to claim the right to rule or the courage to die trying. As banners waved and knights fell, the dragon's roar echoed not in fire but in legend, each emblem a whisper from the old world, each crest a reminder that mankind could never quite forget its oldest adversary or perhaps its truest reflection. For the dragon was more than myth, it was identity, carved into steel, sewn into blood, and burned into memory, while Europe's dragons were cast as symbols of evil and conquest. The Eastern world still looked to them as keepers of balance, the unseen architects of wind and rain. In the folklore of the Balkans and the mountains of Albania, the dragon's spirit was not malevolent but divine, bound to the very breath of the world. They called her Kulshedra, vast, many-headed serpent whose presence could summon drought, lightning, or floods. She was not merely a creature, she was nature's fury itself. When angered, she scorched the sky, withered crops, and turned rivers black. But for every Kulshedra, there was a counterforce, a Drang, a semi-divine hero with wings of thunder who fought to protect mankind. When storms raged across the valleys, people whispered that the Drang and the Kulshedra were battling in the clouds. Thunder was their war cry, lightning their clash of spears. In Slavic lands, the dragon took on 100 faces. The Zamaj, the Zemul were serpents of power, ancient and proud, often tied to the elements. Some were wise protectors, while others were tempests of ruin. In Russia, the three-headed Zemi-Goronich ruled the legends, each head spitting fire, its scales blackened with the soot of centuries. He was the bringer of storms and the eater of kings, said to cause eclipses by swallowing the sun whole. When he moved, the earth trembled, and his breath reeked of sulphur and smoke. Tales spoke of a young guard named Ivan Tsarevich, who faced this creature, armed only with a sword gifted by the Tsar. The sword, they said, moved on its own, striking down the sorcerer who commanded the dragon before cutting off all three of Gorinich's heads in a single, shining stroke. The princess was freed, the kingdom restored, and the beast cast back into darkness. But the story, like all others, was not just about victory, was about balance. For in every dragon's death, there was also loss. The forces of fire and chaos that once kept man humble was slain, and the world became quieter, less wild. Yet, in the whispers of rain, in the trembling of the earth, the people could still feel them, the dragons of the east, guardians of storm and soil, still coiled beneath the clouds, waiting to wake when balance is once again broken. In the frozen lands of the north, where winter's breath turned mountains into white tombs, and the sky itself glowed with the ghostly ribbons of aurora, the dragon became something else entirely, an embodiment of elemental endurance, a blazing force against eternal cold. The Norse spoke of Niach, GGR, the dragon who gnawed endlessly at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. He was not a destroyer in the mortal sense, but a reminder that even the cosmos decayed, that beneath all creation there must be a hunger that never sleeps. His scales were said to be the color of rust and ice, his breath foul with the stench of rot, and his wings beat like the heart of winter. When storms swept across the North Sea, sailors said it was Ni-Hggr, turning in his sleep. In the sagas, dragons were both tormentors and treasures. Fafnir, the cursed son of Hrigmar, was once a man consumed by greed, who transformed into a dragon to guard his ill-gotten gold. His hoard was said to shimmer with the glow of a dying sun, a light that burned with madness and desire. Sigurd, the hero who slew him, did not find peace in victory. The blood of the dragon stained his tongue, granting him the power to understand the speech of birds and beasts, but it also cursed him with the weight of prophecy. He heard whispers of betrayal, of doom, of love destined to end in fire. Even in triumph, the dragon's shadow followed him, reminding all who listened that gold and blood are never clean. In Iceland, where volcanoes roared and the earth split open like the skin of a burning serpent, people believed dragons slept within the mountains. When lava flowed, it was their blood seeping through the cracks of the world. The northern lights were their scales glittering in the heavens, reflections of beasts too vast for mortal eyes. The Vikings carved their likenesses on the prows of longships, not as warnings, but as prayers to borrow the dragon's courage, its wrath, its unyielding will to survive. To the Northmen, the dragon was both doom and destiny, the final trial before glory. And when the end came, when Ragnarok burned the world to ash, it was said Ni-Hggr would rise from the underworld, wings soaked in death, to devour the corpses of the gods and begin the cycle anew, proving that even in destruction, dragons are eternal across the mountains and oceans, in the misty realms of the east. Dragons shed their western ferocity and took on the essence of wisdom, order, and divine power. In China, they were not monsters, but manifestations of the universe's harmony, celestial beings, woven into the pulse of rain, thunder, and breath itself. They coiled through the clouds, long and serpentine, crowned with antlers and whiskers that shimmered like silk threads in the wind. Unlike the fire-breathing demons of Europe, these dragons exhaled life. Their roars summoned storms, their movements shaped rivers, their presence was balance incarnate. Ancient scrolls spoke of the dragon, kings, four rulers of the seas, each governing a corner of the world. To the east, Eoguang ruled the eastern ocean with scales of azure jade, his palace built of coral and pearl. Farmers prayed to him for rain, sailors for calm waters, and emperors for peace. It was believed the emperor himself was the dragon's descendant, his authority drawn from the heavens. To challenge him was to defy the cosmic order. In Japan, dragons like Ryujin lived beneath the waves, keepers of the tides and the jeweled tokens that controlled them. They were neither benevolent nor cruel, but embodiments of nature's duality, beautiful yet unpredictable, capable of giving life or taking it away in an instant. In Korea, they were called Yong, serpents of pure virtue who rose to the heavens after 1,000 years of spiritual growth. Legends tell of Imugi, great serpents who waited patiently in rivers and caves, yearning to ascend. When they finally transformed into true dragons, storms heralded their awakening, and the world seemed to tremble in reverence. The Chinese people traced their lineage to the dragon's breath, believing it flowed through their veins. It became a symbol not of terror but of triumph, its form carved into temples, robes, and imperial thrones. Yet even here, the dragon's power was not without danger. Those who disrespected the balance it guarded often met ruin. There were tales of emperors who abused their heavenly mandate and watched their kingdoms fall beneath floods and famine, as if the dragons themselves withdrew their favor. In the east, dragons were the bridge between man and heaven. between chaos and order, a living paradox that whispered that strength without wisdom was destruction, and wisdom without strength was dust on the wind. Long before the dragon became a beast of flame or guardian of rain, it lived in the heart of creation, myths woven into the fabric of how civilizations explained the birth of worlds. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of humanity's oldest stories spoke of Tiamat, the primordial dragon of chaos, her body vast as the ocean, her breath the storm that gave birth to the gods themselves. She was both mother and monster, creator and destroyer. When her children, the younger gods, rebelled, she rose from the abyss with an army of serpents and demons. The god Marduk faced her, and with a storm-caught net and a spear forged from light, he struck her down. From her divided body, he formed the heavens and the earth. Her ribs became the vault of the sky, her blood the rivers of the world. Creation, then, was born from a dragon's corpse. In the temples of Babylon, priests chanted her name in secret, knowing that even dead, her essence pulsed beneath the world. The Egyptians, too, had their serpent of origin, Apep, the eternal enemy of Ra. Every night, as the sun god travelled through the underworld, Apep rose from the waters to devour the solar bark. Each dawn was not guaranteed, was earned, a victory against the swallowing dark. To the Egyptians, this struggle explained the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Even light had to fight the serpent every morning to rise. In Hindu mythology, the cosmic serpent Anantashya cradled the entire universe in its coils, unending, eternal, and unmoving. On its 1,000 heads rested Vishnu, dreaming creation into existence. The serpent here was not a threat, but the foundation of all being, the stillness that allowed the dance of reality to unfold. Across cultures, the pattern echoed, the serpent or dragon as the axis between chaos and order, the symbol of the universe's first breath. In these stories, it wasn't evil that defined the dragon, it was power. Pure and infinite, a reminder that creation and destruction are twins. Even the Greeks remembered this truth in the figure of Ophion, the serpent who ruled before the gods of Olympus, cast down by Cronus into the churning sea. The dragon's fall was the world's beginning, and it slumbered the pulse of eternity. Sleeping beneath everything that breathes, in the twilight of myth, the dragon often mirrored the feminine, mysterious, nurturing, yet dangerously powerful. Across ancient civilizations, it became the vessel through which early peoples expressed both reverence and fear toward the untamable forces of creation itself. The goddess and the dragon were reflections of each other, life givers wrapped in the skin of chaos. In the story of Tiamat, the Babylonian mother of monsters, her wrath was not simply evil, it was the rebellion of creation against those who would try to control it. She gave birth to gods and demons alike, her rage a reaction to betrayal, her destruction a lament for balance lost. In this, she became both the womb and the tomb of existence, a divine paradox that terrified and fascinated generations. In Greece, the goddess Echidna, half woman and half serpent, was called the mother of monsters. She birthed the Hydra Cerberus and the chimera creatures meant to test the courage of men and heroes. Each beast carried a fragment of her essence, the endless heads of the Hydra echoing immortality, the fire of the chimera symbolizing untamed desire, and Cerberus guarding the boundary between life and death. The dragon here was no longer a random terror, it was the feminine principle unbound, wild and immortal. In East Asia, too, the dragon intertwined with feminine divinity. Nuwa, the Chinese goddess who shaped humanity from clay, was depicted with the body of a dragon, her scales shining with the colors of dawn. When the pillars of heaven broke, she mended them with stones of 5 hues, her serpentine form coiling round the fractured sky like a mother shielding her children. To the ancient mind, this image was balance itself, where chaos became care and destruction was met with restoration. Even in medieval Christian symbolism, echoes of the feminine dragon lingered in shadows. The Virgin Mary was often depicted trampling a serpent underfoot. Yet the very need to show her victory betrayed an older truth that the dragon once represented a rival power, the sacred feminine that could not be contained. And so, beneath the shifting names and symbols, the dragon carried the pulse of forgotten goddesses, their stories buried beneath centuries of conquest and rewritten scripture. It was not always evil, not always fire, but something deeper, older, a memory of when creation itself had scales, and the divine wore the shape of a serpent watching over the birth of the world. When the sands began to swallow cities and the stars guided men through endless dunes, the dragon found a new form born not from the sea or sky, but from heat, mirage, and silence. In the arid realms of Arabia and North Africa, the serpent of legend became a whisper of divine punishment and temptation. Known as the Tannin, Zalfakar, or serpent of the waste, it coiled beneath the dunes where time itself seemed to sleep. Its eyes were said to glow like twin suns under the desert moon. Its breath dry as bone dust, capable of turning men to ash with a single exhalation. Nomads told stories of encountering strange trails in the sand-long grooves that curved like rivers, disappearing into nowhere. These, they said, were the marks of a dragon's passage, a sign that some ancient guardian was still awake beneath the dunes. In early Hebrew scripture, the Leviathan was a creature of the deep and ocean dragon that rivaled creation itself, but in desert retellings, its spirit moved inland, merging with tales of fiery serpents and cursed oases where no bird dared to fly. Travelers swore that at night the dunes themselves moved, shaped by invisible wings, as if something vast and breathing stirred below. Islamic tradition remembered the dragon as a sign of divine wrath, yet also of divine mystery. In certain apocryphal texts, it was said that when the world ends, a beast named Dabit Olad would rise from the earth, bearing marks of both scales and light, neither wholly good nor evil, but a messenger to the unbelieving. This image blurred the line between myth and prophecy, between the creature and the cosmic warning it represented. In Persian mythology, Zahak the Serpent King was a man who fell to corruption when 2 dragons grew from his shoulders, whispering dark desires into his ears. Each day they demanded human brains to feed upon, symbolizing greed and tyranny feeding on the minds of the people. Yet even his curse had a beginning in deception, for it was Ahriman, the spirit of darkness, who planted the serpents there. To the desert peoples, dragons were not beasts to slay, but lessons to fear, symbols of excess, arrogance, and forgotten covenants. Their bones, buried under miles of sand, became the foundations of ruined temples, and their breath hot, invisible, and eternal was the desert wind itself, reminding wanderers that some fires never need flame to burn. As humanity moved northward and westward, leaving the deserts behind, the dragon found new homes in the veins of the earth. In the dark mouths of mountains, where the air was cold and damp and the echoes of dripping water seemed eternal, it became a creature of greed and memory, a keeper of what lay buried and forgotten. The miners of ancient Europe believed that dragons slept deep beneath the rock, curling around veins of gold and silver like serpents guarding their own hearts. To disturb them was to awaken disaster. The Germans called it the Lindworm, a long, wingless serpent that slithered through caves and guarded ancient hoards. Its breath was venom, its skin as tough as stone, and its presence was said to warp the air, making torches flicker and compasses spin. In the dark folklore of the Alps, these dragons were said to cry like children, luring miners deeper until the tunnels collapsed, sealing both treasure and trespasser in eternal night. In Wales and the British Isles, the dragon took on a royal aspect red against white, symbol of prophecy and nation. When Vortigern tried to build his tower and it kept falling, Merlin revealed that two dragons fought beneath the foundation, one red, one white, the eternal struggle between native and invader, chaos and order. Their battle caused the earth to tremble, and the legend spread. Dragons were the spirits of the land itself, their fury the reason mountains smoked and rivers shifted. In Eastern Europe, mountains were believed to be dragons turned to stone, sleeping with one eye open, their breath emerging as mist. The Slavs spoke of Zemi, a dragon that loved both gold and women, taking human form to deceive and dominate. When the villagers prayed for deliverance, only a hero armed with purity and iron could face it, descending into caves that seemed to breathe, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The deeper he went, the more the air felt alive, humming with unseen power. Even today, in the abandoned mines and hollow mountains of Europe, people still whisper of strange rumblings, lights that flicker in places no human has gone. They say it's just pressure, shifting rock, or trapped gas, but some insist it's something older, something patient, still coiled around the roots of the earth. Dreaming of the time when the world was young and gold was its blood, the ancients once believed that fire was alive, that deep below the crust of the world, dragons breathed in their sleep and the earth exhaled through volcanoes. Every eruption, every tremor, every plume of smoke rising from a mountain's heart was said to be a dragon turning in its slumber, restless beneath layers of stone. From Iceland to Indonesia, the myth burned the same way across time and language. In Japan, the mountain god Ryujin was said to keep the fire of the earth within his scales, his roar shaking Mount Fuji itself. In the Pacific Islands, tales of Pele, the fire goddess, spoke of her battles with mugwraith, dragon-like lizards who ruled the lava fields before humankind. Each eruption was their eternal war renewed, flame against flame, neither willing to yield. In the Roman world, the philosopher Pliny the Elder wrote of creatures that lived beneath Vesuvius-winged serpents that fed on heat and rose to the sky when angered, raining fire upon the cities of men. When Pompeii vanished beneath ash in 79 CE, the people who fled claimed to hear something roaring beneath the earth, something more than mere thunder. Medieval Christians, inheriting the old beliefs, saw dragons in the fire of hell and in the punishment of sinners. The molten rivers of volcanoes became the breath of the great serpent Satan himself. Yet not all saw doom in the flame. The alchemists of the Middle Ages worshipped the symbol of the dragon, Ouroboros the serpent eating its own tails, the perfect emblem of the eternal cycle, life, death, and rebirth. To them, the fire within the earth was not destruction but transformation. It melted impurities, reforged the world anew, and in its crucible, base metals could become gold. The dragon's fire, they said, was the secret of creation itself. Even modern geology echoes the myth in strange ways. We now know that beneath us, molten rock moves like living blood, that pressure builds and releases like the breath of some enormous, unseen creature. Perhaps the old myths were closer to truth than we thought, not of literal dragons, but of a living planet whose heartbeat is heat and whose sigh is smoke. The fire has always been there, whispering through stone, waiting for the day it is remembered again, not as punishment, but as power. The ancient pulse of the dragon beneath our feet. There is a strange pattern hidden in how humanity has always described dragons. Across continents, separated by oceans and centuries, the same symbols appear: the scales, the wings, the smoke, the hoarded gold. It's as if every culture inherited a fragment of the same dream, retelling it in their own language. In China, dragons were cosmic forces, serpentine beings who carried clouds in their claws and shaped rivers with their tails. In Europe, dragons were the devourers, the dark mirror of human greed, sleeping atop mountains of treasure. Yet even here, beneath the differences, the roots entwine. Scales represent not just armor but transformation, like the shedding of skin or the alchemical refining of spirit. Wings are not merely for flight, they symbolize transcendence, the breaking of human limitation. The smoke, the fire, the hoarded gold ore speak to power, to something buried deep within us that yearns for dominion, for survival, for the divine. Ancient shamans in Central Asia painted serpent patterns on cave walls, believing that smoke rising from fire carried their prayers to the gods. The same smoke a dragon was said to breathe. The language of dragons became the language of rituals, coils, serpentine shapes found on pottery, weapons, and temple carvings. Each line was a symbol of movement, energy, and eternal return. When early linguists studied mythic epics like the Enuma Elish or Beowulf, they noticed a recurring word at the heart of each tale, something that meant serpent, storm, or chaos, always. The dragon was tied to the border between worlds, between water and sky, life and death, spirit and flesh. It was never just a creature. It was a force. Some say the language of dragons is the oldest language on earth, the language of vibration, thunder, and flame. Sound itself was sacred to them. Their roar was the echo of creation, the first sound the universe made when it came alive. Even today, we feel something ancient stir when we hear thunder, when we see lightning fracture the sky like a serpent of fire. Perhaps what our ancestors called the voice of the dragon was the earth's own, language raw energy speaking through the world. And though the myths have faded into bedtime stories, the symbols remain, hidden in flags, emblems, and dreams, whispering in the universal tongue of power, awe, and transformation that has always belonged to the dragon. Across the ancient world, dragons were not only destroyers, they were keepers of gates, guardians of thresholds that separated one reality from another. In temples carved from stone, in stories whispered by firelight, they stood between the mortal and the divine, watching, waiting, testing those who dared to cross. In the myths of Mesopotamia, the dragon Tiamat guarded the chaos before creation, her body forming the barrier between the cosmos and the void. When the god Marduk defeated her, he split her body in two half, became the heavens, half the sea, and thus the first gate was opened. In Greece, dragons coiled around sacred trees and golden fruits, keeping humankind from the forbidden. The serpent-laden watched over the garden of the Hesperides, where the golden apples of immortality grew, and when Heracles came to steal them, it was the dragon's endless vigilance he had to overcome. In the east, the dragon was the gate itself, Fat, the threshold of rivers, temples, and storms. In Chinese mythology, the dragon kings ruled the four seas, each guarding a direction of the earth. To cross into their realm required tribute and humility. those who disrespected the water's spirit were swallowed whole by floods. In Norse legend, the dragon Fafnir guarded the cursed hoard of the gods, sleeping atop gold that shimmered like sunlight trapped underground. He was not merely protecting treasure, he was guarding the human desire for it. To slay him was to confront the greed within one's own soul. These stories share an unspoken rule: the dragon appears at the edge of transformation. It is the last obstacle before wisdom, enlightenment, or power. Those who face it unprepared are consumed. Those who understand its nature emerge changed. Even in Christianity, the serpent at the gate of Eden played this same role, offering forbidden knowledge, tempting the soul to cross the threshold from innocence to awareness. The dragon, in every form, tests what lies within us. It is both gate and guardian, both path and punishment. Every culture, every age, has told of heroes who stood before its shadow, some victorious, others destroyed, but all forever altered. The dragon is the eternal question that guards every human passage. Are you ready to confront what waits beyond? Throughout history, rulers have sought to embody the dragon not as a monster to be feared, but as a symbol of unmatched power, divine authority, and eternal dominion. In the mist-covered hills of ancient Britain, kings traced their lineage back to dragons, claiming the strength and wisdom of these celestial beasts as proof of their right to rule. The most famous of all was Uther Pendragon, whose very name means head dragon. Legends say a comet shaped like a dragon appeared in the night sky before his birth, blazing across the heavens like a fiery crown. From this omen, the Druids declared that a ruler chosen by destiny was coming, one who carried the spirit of the dragon within. Even the great King Arthur, his son, was said to have fought beneath banners adorned with twin golden dragons, their tails entwined in eternal battle. In Wales, the red dragon Wydreg Gogby came the soul of the nation, a creature both feared and revered. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth, when the wizard Merlin prophesied the red dragon's rise against the white, it became more than myth, it became destiny, a story of struggle and survival woven into the Welsh heart. In the East, the dragon was the emperor's totem, a living emblem of cosmic order. Chinese emperors wore robes embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, each scale representing a virtue, each motion symbolizing balance between heaven and earth. To sit upon the dragon throne was to rule by mandate of the divine. The dragon was not evil, it was perfection, harmony, strength beyond the mortal. In Japan, too, emperors were called descendants of the dragon, and the curling shapes of dragons adorned the beams of temples, palaces, and even swords, carrying divine protection into every act of rule. In contrast, medieval Europe painted dragons as the ultimate foe of saints and kings, yet even there the line blurred. Royal coats of arms bore dragons as protectors, fierce and eternal. To have one upon your crest meant you were not merely human, you were chosen by the same primal fire that forged the world. Power, wisdom, fear, and reverence coiled together beneath the dragon's wings. From the banners of kings to the thrones of emperors, the dragon's shadow has always fallen over power itself, whispering one truth across time, that to rule is to hold fire in your hands, and to never let it consume you. In the heart of medieval Europe, when faith ruled the air and every shadow was measured by scripture, dragons became the embodiment of sin itself. They were the adversaries of saints, the devourers of innocence, the beasts whose defeat symbolized the triumph of divine purity over corruption. Yet beneath this Christian armor of morality, older meanings lingered. The legend of St. George and the dragon, told and retold from monastery to marketplace, is perhaps the clearest reflection of this transformation. The story begins not in mythic realms, but in a town haunted by a creature of smoke and scales. Each day it demanded sacrifice first animals, then children, until at last the king's own daughter was chosen. Bound to a rock beside the dark waters, she awaited death, her tears mingling with the rising mist. But before the beast could strike, a knight arrived at St. George, his armor gleaming like dawn against the dark. He faced the dragon not with fear, but with faith. His lance pierced its side, and the beast fell to the ground, subdued by the sign of the cross. The princess tied her belt around its neck, and together they led the no-docile creature into the town square. Only after the people converted to Christianity did George slay the dragon, freeing them from fear and sin alike. It is a story of salvation, but one that echoes older, pagan truths. The dragon at the lake recalls the serpents of Babylon, the monsters of the deep that guarded the chaos before creation. The virgin bound to the rock mirrors ancient fertility rites, where the death of one brought renewal to all. St. George's spear, striking the serpent, is the spear of the storm god, the lightning that pierces the abyss. The Christian tale merely reshaped the myth casting, the eternal struggle between light and shadow, spirit and matter, as a battle for the soul. Yet even in defeat, the dragon's power lingers. Cathedrals built in its image still raise their gargoyled heads toward the sky, their mouths forever frozen in silent roars. It is as if the church itself could not banish the beast completely, only tame it, keeping its image carved in stone, a reminder that faith may triumph over darkness. But it is darkness that gives faith its fire, far from the cathedrals of Europe. On the other side of the world, the dragon took on a different form, one not of sin or destruction, but of balance and divine grace. In the East, particularly in China, the dragon was never cast as an enemy of man. It was the bridge between heaven and earth, the very breath of the cosmos. They called it lone, a word that carried reverence, not fear. It had no wings, yet it flew through clouds. It had no lungs, yet it breathed storms. The Eastern dragon was born of air and water, two elements of life, and thus it became a symbol of prosperity, of rain that fed the rice fields, of rivers that pulsed through empires like veins of silver. Where the Western dragon guarded treasure, the Eastern dragon was the treasure itself, the sacred energy of existence. Its body, long and coiling like smoke, was adorned with the scales of carp, the horns of a stag, the claws of an eagle, the eyes of a demon, and the whiskers of an old sage. Each part was drawn from the natural world, forming a being that embodied harmony between all creatures. The dragon kings ruled the seas from crystal palaces beneath the waves, each guarding a cardinal direction, south, east, and west. When drought struck, the people would climb mountains, burn incense, and pray to the sky for the dragons to open the gates of rain. Their dance across the heavens was said to paint the shifting clouds, and their roar was the voice of thunder. Even the emperor, the son of heaven, wore robes embroidered with dragon's 5 claws on each foot, a sign that his authority came not from conquest, but from cosmic alignment. To see a dragon in a dream was an omen of destiny. To be born in its year was to carry its spirit. Yet even these dragons had their shadows. In old Chinese tales, when the balance of nature was broken, a dragon might turn against heaven itself, punished by lightning and bound beneath mountains. But unlike the serpents of the West, these fallen dragons were not evil, they were forces of nature returned to rest. The Eastern dragon reminded humanity that power is not always to be slain, that sometimes the wisest act is to listen to the sky and remember that the storm above is also the life below. In the ancient chronicles of China, beyond the mist and beneath the shimmering surface of the Eastern Ocean, the dragon kings ruled their underwater realms with solemn grace and divine authority. Each king presided over one of the 4 seas, the East Sea, South Sea, West Sea, and North Sea, each representing the seasons, the directions, and the cycles of life itself. Guang, the dragon king of the East Sea, was the most renowned among them, his palace carved from pearls and coral, his court attended by creatures of the deep, seahorses and fish who sang hymns to his power. It was he who sent the rains that nourished the fields, his tail stirring the monsoon winds. Yet he was also the most prideful, for with dominion came vanity, and vanity, in myth, often precedes the storm. The dragon kings were not mere beasts, but celestial bureaucrats, administrators of natural order under the Jade Emperor's will. They held scrolls of divine law, each edict governing when to flood, when to recede, when to summon lightning, when to let the skies sleep. But when men grew arrogant and polluted rivers, the dragons withdrew their blessings. Villages withered under drought, and emperors pleaded for rain with desperate sacrifices of jade and silk. The legends speak of Najar, the boy warrior born from a lotus, who challenged Guang after the dragon demanded tribute of human lives. When Najar slew the dragon's son, Guang rose in fury, his serpentine body twisting the seas into whirlpools that could swallow ships whole. The heavens trembled until the boy offered his own flesh to atone for his defiance. Such tales were not of victory or defeat. They were lessons carved into the heart of nature's law. Balance must be maintained, or the waters themselves will rise against mankind. Over centuries, temples were built to honor these dragon kings, standing along riverbanks and coastlines where incense smoke mingled with sea spray. Fishermen would bow before setting sail, offering roasted piglets and rice wine to ensure calm seas and full nets. And when the clouds gathered and lightning flashed over the horizon, people whispered that the dragon kings were meeting once more, conferring over the fate of the earth, debating whether humanity had earned the next rainfaller, another wave of cleansing wrath. In nearly every culture that has ever told stories, there exists a myth of something vast and coiled sleeping beneath the earth, a dragon not of the skies or the seas, but of the underworld itself. The Norse called it Ni Hggr, the corpse eater who gnawed at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, waiting for the day the tree would fall and the heavens would collapse. In the east, the serpent curled beneath the mountains was not always evil, but ancient and dreaming, its slumber shaping the world's pulse like the steady beat of a cosmic heart. The Chinese believed the movements of the dragon beneath the soil caused earthquakes. The Mayans said the feathered serpent slithered beneath the land to emerge only when balance was broken. Across deserts and frozen tundras, the story was the same. Below us lies something enormous, something aware. Some archaeologists have wondered if these legends might echo ancient human memory, volcanoes erupting without warning, the ground shattering beneath terrified feet, or the deep growl of the earth before a quake. To early humanity, such moments must have felt alive, as if a creature was stirring far below, stretching in its sleep, and so they named it dragon. Others suggest the myth hides a more spiritual truth, that the dragon beneath the world symbolizes the subconscious, the unseen forces within human nature. Just as the surface world depends on the unseen magma and roots below, our waking lives are fed by hidden instincts and emotions, powerful and dangerous when ignored. In alchemy, this dragon represented both the danger and the potential of transformation, the black serpent that must be faced before rebirth. The Ouroboros, the dragon biting its own tail, was the eternal cycle. Death becoming life, destruction birthing creation. The ancients may have sensed that beneath every structure, whether the earth, society, or the human soul, something primal always moves. It is restless, it hungers, it watches. Myths warn that if the dragon awakens, it does not simply destroy it, renews through destruction, forcing the old to crumble so that the new may rise. The question remains, whispered through centuries of ritual and fear, is the dragon beneath the world merely a metaphor? Or have we always lived upon something alive, something vast and ancient, waiting for its next breath to shake the world? As the myths circle back upon themselves, one question lingers like smoke rising from an extinguished flame. Did the dragons ever truly die? Or did they simply retreat, dissolving into the elements they once commanded? In the oldest scriptures, it is said that when the age of dragons ended, they did not perish, but became the forces of the natural world itself. Their breath became the wind, their scales the mountains, their blood the rivers that pulse through the veins of the earth. In this telling, every gust of air, every distant thunderclap, every flicker of lightning is a remnant of their memory, echoing faintly from the time when they were gods in flesh. Perhaps humanity's rise was not the reason they vanished, but rather their transformation. Some philosophers suggest that dragons were never physical beings, but archetypes of cosmic power, representations of nature's wild intelligence, too great for human minds to comprehend directly. Others propose that they were once real creatures, the great reptiles of prehistory, their bones mistaken for monsters by ancient eyes, their legends evolving as fossils turned to myth. But there is another, more haunting idea, that the dragons withdrew not because they were defeated, but because they chose silence, that they slumber beneath oceans and deserts still, listening to the hum of a world that has forgotten their name. And when humanity's noise grows too great, when machines and smoke drown the music of the earth, they will awaken, not in rage, but in remembrance, to reclaim what was once theirs. Across cultures, prophecies whisper of a time called the Age of Return, when the balance of fire, air, water, and earth will be broken, and the dragons will rise again not as destroyers, but as restorers. Their awakening will cleanse what has been poisoned, burn away what has been corrupted, and breathe life into what has gone silent. Whether one believes in literal dragons or not, their story endures because it speaks to something elemental within Uster, struggle between chaos and order, creation and decay, fear and wonder. In the end, the dragon is not just a creature of scales and fire, it is a mirror held to the soul of humanity. For every time we dream of dragons, we are remembering something ancient within ourselves, something wild and infinite, waiting to be reborn when the world grows quiet enough to hear the last breath of the dragon.